I'm very happy to be here amongst some pretty big names.
Lovely, thank you, Nick. And we're going to move on to Rema next.
Hello?
I don't know.
Oh, good, we're working. Oh, good. Yeah, my name's Rema Grace. I'm an artist of many different forms. And a creative director of a little not-for-profit mycelial arts company called Mycelium Thinking CIC. At the surface, I often am seen wearing this ginormous mushroom hat. Um, a lot of the stuff looks like fun, and I'm sure it is. So we can plug into mushrooms, and we sing about mushrooms. I write about mushrooms. I grow fungi. I talk about fungi. Again, I'd like to mirror that. I don't count myself as a mycologist or an expert at all. I count myself as an artist. Um, but a lot of what I do is about deepening connection with ourselves, with others in a community, and with the wider planet. And mushrooms are very much the mascot of that, but I also deeply care about the fungi world too. Obviously, I'm quite obsessed. Like, I think I'm not alone in this room though, which is nice. But yeah, I can go more in depth into like what kind of art forms later on when we can show our passions, and I'll show some of the different artistic things we've done in the past. But yeah, I'm really glad to be here and just waffle on about fungi and arts. Like, yeah, thank you very much for
Yeah,
inviting me.
that sounds brilliant. I can't wait to hear more. Lovely. So we're going to move in now to a quick few questions. Let's get more into specifics. So, what fungi would you be and why? We're getting quite deep with our first one, but I think we're going to get some great answers. So, Ali, I'm going to come to you first.
Do you know, it's funny because, I've done a few podcasts here and there, but I've never been asked that question. So I prepared because I knew this was coming. So what fungi would it be? I've tried not to choose the one that I'd like to be. I thought I'd choose the one that actually represents me. So if I was a fungus, I've gone for the stinkhorn. So if anyone's, I've not thought about this in depth, by the way, but because there's some intrigue around it. It's not to everyone's taste because it stinks, and that's as far as the comparisons in terms of personal hygiene go. I might smell. I don't know. People might be too kind to tell me, but yeah, stinkhorn. For anyone who doesn't know, it's this incredible organism, this incredible fungus, and not a mushroom. If it did a quick bit of morphology, a mushroom would be something traditional with a stipe or a stem and a cap on it, like a mushroom you might buy in the supermarket. That's a mushroom. Fungi can be all different shapes and sizes, cups, balls, corals, and so this is a stinkhorn. Its name is Phallus impudicus, actually. Phallus meaning it's phallic in shape. In fact, I've got a crocheted version of one that someone kindly knitted for me. One of the people that comes on my walks, I lead guided walks also, and she crocheted me this stinkhorn. And there's a little clue as to why they're pretty special. I'm supposed to be talking about me, and I'm talking about the fungi. I'm sorry, but basically, this green. It comes up. It's one of the fastest growing species in the world. It comes up overnight. It can grow like 20 centimeters overnight. It's remarkable within a matter of hours. But this gleba, this weird spore mass, the spores are the seeds. It wants to get rid of them, like all organisms. They just want to, create more organisms through their seed. And the thing is, it smells so bad on purpose. It smells of gassy, putrid, rotten meat, maybe even poo. And the flies think, yeah, I'll have that. That's a meal. And they come in and they take it and have a little nibble. They realize they've been tricked and off they go. And with them take the spores. So an amazing spore dispersal thing. I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to speak about that. But I thought the fact that they're a bit weird, not to everyone's taste, but maybe a little bit intriguing, maybe you want to know more. I thought that might be a good comparison to who I am. So that's me and my comparison. If I was a fungus, I guess I'd be some kind of stinkhorn. Is that all right, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, you said it, not me,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, fair dues. And it's one of the only fungi, and this again, no, actually, I was going to say it's one of the only fungi you can smell before you see it, and that in its own right makes it intriguing. Like, oh, and
Yeah.
again, maybe that's where the comparison is similar. I don't know.
Thank you. I'm going to move on next to you, Nick.
Yeah, well, mine is definitely not quite as sciencey or thought through. I picked mine based on its name purely because I thought it was most similar to myself. I chose the dingy twiglet. I don't know why. I think the dingy just because I don't know. I'm kind of dusky looking, and then twiglet because I'm quite small as well. So not quite as sciencey fungi based, but yeah, if I was to choose a fungi, that's what I'd be, a dingy twiglet. Which does sound, yeah, it does sound like a bit of an insult to myself, but also it's also kind of a cool name as well. And it's so I did look it up. It's actually just one of a small sort of yeah nutrient rich grassland type fungi. Um, it doesn't look the worst. It doesn't look like a well, you know what Ali's looks like.
I think that's something I do always love about fungi actually is that they've always just got such weird names. So both of yours have really exemplified that fact. We're going to move on next to Roma.
I'm going to pick the obvious because it's what I've got on my head. I have taken creative license because this is hot pink and the actual fly agaricus Amanita muscaria is not hot pink. So I would be that mushroom. And because it's so like culturally rich and in a lot of fairy tales and depictions, and I like the idea of fairies sitting on my head and maybe a toad chilling out with me. And it's a super mushroom for this time of year. I just love at the moment, like anywhere I go in Christmas shops, there's just fungi everywhere now. And 10 years ago, I swear there wasn't as much. So I got loads of like lovely, dangly fly agarics on my Christmas tree now, which is making me really happy that I see them everywhere in every shop I go into these days. But yeah, I like the fly agaric, all the different stories and the myths that it might have inspired Santa Claus. I'm not sure how true that is, but the red and the white spots and the Sami origins. So yeah, the obvious one, I'm afraid.
No, I mean, and you literally are dressed as a fly agaric, so I don't think there was much of a choice there. Thank you, everyone. The next question we're going on to is another quite wholesome question. So, what do you like about fungi so much, and how do fungi relate to your everyday life? I'm going to start off the same order, Ali again.
Okay. There's not a webinar big enough, is there? Why do you like fungi so much? It's really hard to consolidate this into a really bite-sized moment. They meet my needs. So on a personal level, they meet my needs so well. Potential attention deficit kind of vibes going on, and there are so many avenues of pleasure that I can get from fungi. So that it becomes a thing like almost on a daily basis, I might just get that little hit and it's a little victory because I see something, because I know my habitats, and hopefully between us all, we'll talk about that through the evening about how accessible they can be or why they can, tick that box for somebody. But lots of little avenues of pleasure. So for me, creatively, again, a little bit like Rema, it meets my needs for art. So I make videos, I make art, I make paper mache mushrooms on little shields and stuff. I do badges, so make art. Like I always thought that people when like scout, I used to be a scout. My dad was a scout leader. I thought, oh, they should have badges for every different fungus. When you found it, you get the badge. So I make my own little badges and stuff. Um, but on that genuine for the reason for the bigger picture, like we're all here tonight, that nature connection, that connecting with your environment. There almost isn't a day go by because fungi are all year round. As much as you might think there's a boom season, and there is, they're actually all year round. And I won't pretend that I go looking for them all year round, but they make me, they bring me such joy daily. There isn't a day go by that I don't think about fungi. But with that also makes me a little caveat here: a terrible dad, an awful husband, rubbish friend, especially in fungi season because I'm just that person that's always either finds a way to talk about fungi. So they bring me enormous amounts of pleasure. Um, how it relates to my everyday life, like I said, they're so accessible. This is what I want to really get across, because they can be quite daunting for people in nature who might know flowers or birds or whatever the particular interests are, and they're just so vast. But I think they're a leveler. I think they're a great leveler. They don't discriminate. That's what I want to say. Fungi are so accessible because it doesn't matter where you live, your race, colour, creed, and all the things that come in between. Wherever you are, and you don't have to live in the countryside, you don't have to live near an ancient woodland, and those are amazing habitats to potentially be around. I have this scratch little town that I live in, and but there's pockets everywhere. You can go to a garden centre and find fungi if you know the trees. I'll give you a little hack about that later, actually, I think. You can go on a dog walk. It can be taking your kids to football training, the school drop, the school run. If you know, if your radar is on, if you can learn about fungi, understand habitats, which hopefully we'll share again tonight, then suddenly fungi, and that, again, little victories, that daily you have those little moments of joy, of pleasure. I guess it's like, for the youth, like Pokemon Go, whatever, going out and finding, it's a treasure hunt. And who doesn't like finding the treasure? And that's what fungi are to me. So many avenues. If it's not finding one, I can be reading about one and being fascinated by it. But they're all around us. I found some eyelash fungi on a bit of old rotten wood chipboard at school yesterday. We built some little hedgehog houses years ago. They're now rotting away in our little gardens. And I found these eyelash fungi, and they're the most beautiful thing. If you don't know, look that one up. And you can get a macro lens. Suddenly you're in this little world, with that macro world of nature. So that was exactly what I didn't want it to be. It was not concise. It was all over the place, but a rough idea of why I love fungi, because on a daily basis, they can bring me so much pleasure. Oh, I must tell you the main bit. Forgot 3 minutes. Let's 30 seconds. Someone got 30 seconds. Here's the thing, right? I know I'm biased, and there's no other way about that. I know that I am. But I believe it hits all 5 pillars of well-being. So there's 5 pillars essentially of what makes us happy, or what can make us happy. And it hits so many. One, being outdoors. I've had to write them down because I always forget. Being mindful, being physical, the social element. So using your senses. And I don't believe, and I've looked into this quite deep, not massively, and I don't believe there's many hobbies that can touch quite the same, meet every single part of those 5 pillars quite like fungi do. So you meet all your needs for well-being. And that actually is the bottom line. That's what I should have started with and finished with. That, because I've done a few podcasts and I get asked this question, I had to really think, why do I care? It's because it can bring you such well-being, because it's meeting your needs on so many levels. And that is the end, I think. There you go. Okay.
I feel like that's ending. Love it.
Oh.
Brilliant, thank you. Next, we're going to come on to Nick.
Yeah, so I guess the main reason, I mean, it's probably exactly the same as for all the other areas of wildlife, and in particular how it ties into my wildlife touring around here, but also just generally wildlife watching and that sort of thing. In that, it's very, I mean, obviously autumn is a very key time of year for fungi, but also there are types of fungi to look out for all through the year. So there's always something, and it's always changing. So similar to birds and plants and butterflies, etc., every week is different throughout the year. So there's always something new to look forward to. And the main thing for me, which I think I'll be talking about afterwards, is, and it goes for the same for all kinds of wildlife, but particularly with fungi actually, is how it ties into habitat. So you could go to all different kinds of habitats and see a whole different range of fungi, regardless of wherever you go. And it's that thing of if you go to a different habitat, you're going to come across not just different types of fungi, but all different types of structures and colors, and yeah, all kinds of appearances, and not just ones which grow on the floor, but ones which grows on trees and various parts of the habitat. So for me, it's the real mix of things, but it's always exciting because there's so many and there's so many different types. So for me, and it also the way that it sort of links to it sort of reminds me of wildflowers a lot, because there's so many different colors, but also they can be so hidden away. So yeah, that's probably a bit wishy-washy, but yeah, generally just the way that it sort of reflects on habitat and how there's so many different types and varieties. It's always inspiring, and it's always yeah, there's always something to look for all through the year. So yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere and all the time. I think that's what I've got across from both of what you've said there. Lovely, thank you for that. We're going to move next on to Rema.
Oh, what was the question again? I'm just reading it. Yeah, oh no, like this question, same with Alex, like, oh, my brain's like, yeah, as an artist, I would say the healing benefits of the metaphors of fungi. I find a lot of well-being in fungi and understanding them on a deeper level. So I'm not going to go through a whole life story here, but oh, it all relates to fungi. No, probably when I was in my younger teens, I spent a lot of time skiving school. I didn't really fit in there. I fit in well in the woodlands, looking at strange fungi and things other kids maybe weren't interested in. That was always me. And I went through quite a period of being disconnected with nature after that. I really struggled with the school environment. I really struggled to fit in really anywhere. And part of my healing process, and this was, early 20s, was coming back to connection. And right around that time, the synchronicity of finding mushrooms again was there, and learning more about the underground and mycelium and this vast interconnected um, web networks under us that, I didn't know for most of my life, that has always been there. It felt like a lot of those metaphors felt like they really held me, and they made me come back to this space of connection. Because sometimes science, especially in school, you learn it's very like linear and it's all in boxes and it's all like, for me, that didn't come naturally. Whereas seeing that this interconnected, kind of messy and diverse network is very natural made me feel natural as quite a scatterbrained person that doesn't fit into those box-like spaces. So really it comes down to the metaphors of fungi, as I said, particularly another one is spores that I connected with a lot last year. Because I learned how much they're vast. We're breathing them in right now. They're everywhere. They help form clouds. They support rain in rainforests. There's a fungi, I can't remember its name, that shoots out spores, and it's one of the fastest moving organisms on the planet. So it's like it's just that whole idea of spores to me, just that, and that's just one tiny little aspect of fungi. It just ignites a whole realm of imagination in my brain that is really exciting, and I get a real dopamine rush from it. Mushrooms is great for that. But if I'm having a bad day or struggling, I might turn to an aspect of fungi and go, spores, you feel really small right now, but all those tiny little actions you're doing, all those unseen things across the world that people are doing, they actually have huge impacts. You just can't necessarily always see them. So that's just one example of a metaphor that I find really helpful from the fungi world. But it doesn't have to be fungi. I think it's that connection with a non-human species that you deepen through that relationship. And for me, I do that through art. But there's many different ways of doing that. But yeah, I could go on a bit more, but I think that'll do for now.
No, that was really beautiful. Thank you. It was really touching. Yeah. Um, yes, there were some great answers. So now we're all fired up. We're all really passionate about fungi too. And now I'd like to know, where is your favourite place to find fungi, so that maybe we can all go and find some fungi as well.
We're staying in order, Katie?
Yeah, we can go same order again.
Okay. In that case, okay, so a little bit along the lines of what I said. For me, it's the accessibility that if you really start to get a radar on, start to understand fungi, which hopefully will give you these insights this evening, you could argue anywhere, and there's nothing like walking out into a beautiful woodland. We all know what that might feel like. I'm sure I'm in good company here. It's like preaching to the converted, I imagine, in many respects. But I really want to kind of fly the flag for the urban environment, so urban fungi, because that many of us will be in those spaces. It doesn't matter it's city, town, wherever you are, there are fungi around, but urban especially, because we'll all find ourselves in those pockets of spaces. So whether it's gardens, parks, roundabouts, hedgerows, cemeteries is a big one, which are, widespread nationwide. These little, God's acre, they call that. I like that name. These little spaces provide, again, habitat. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that hopefully tonight, because that's a really key area and a big part of the radar to us starting to find and seek out and allow fungi into your life. So urban fungi, what a gift. Like I said, I keep going back to this radar. I don't know if that's working for anyone as a metaphor, but I know it is. I know it is for me, because it's on it's a screaming 9, 10 during fungi season, simmers on the 3, 4, but it never really goes away. And I'll find fungi when I least expect it, because that radar just senses that, hang on, this is the right habitat. My subconscious, when you've been doing it for a little while, that 10,000 hours to be an expert kind of thing. Not that I am, but many hours over many years. You just get a vibe of a space, and your subconscious starts to work, and you might pick something out. So I've named some places urban wise. Edgelands. So whether you're taking, like I say, whether it's a dog walk, The school run, I came across my first split gills, which are this incredible fungus that's one of the world's most hardy fungi. Used to be a southern species in this country, but it's making its way up. And quite hull specific. Used to be just on beech trees, but you can find in other spaces. It's a remarkable fungus. But I found my first split gills on a rotten tree on the way dropping the kids off a few years ago. And I'm like, what a beautiful little moment. I did not expect that. I might even have been stressed because I shouldn't have been doing the school run. I should have been doing whatever. And suddenly I've got this little pocket of pleasure. Um, wood chip on car parks. You know, you can go to a B&Q, you can go to your local Aldi. I found morels. I travelled 100 miles once. I've never done this before or since. I once did one big round trip to see something I knew I might never see again. I even pulled my kid out of football. My son at the time was like 7. I said, son, I'm going to show you first wild morel. There's a chance we'll find one. I've been given a heads up. Found a wild morel, these things that people, an edible delicacy. We found it, amazing, travelled back the very next day. 100, so that was a 100-mile round trip. 100 meters away in the local Aldi car park in the wood chip, I found morels. Different type, but I love the irony. I love the serendipity element about that. It's beautiful. My son trained a football theme here, but I think that's even that. Hopefully, the relatability of it. That whatever you've got going on, whether it's going to the gym, I find St George's mushrooms in my leisure centre car park. I find Belit's beautiful porcini, these incredible big stout mushrooms in the local grammar school gardens on the walk home. Your journeys can become fungal journeys. And when I took my kid to a new training ground, I'm like, I've watched you train for many, many hours. I'm just going to nip off for an hour. There's a local graveyard I spotted on the way past. I went in there. I found my first giant puffball. And the same space, I found a very rare bolete. And I go and visit every year just to say hi. And sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Little pockets of pleasure are available to us in an urban environment. Edgelands. Every football game, I'm going to football again. I'll go to half time and, you know, I chat to the parents. I know what the social should look like and what that can do. But I have a little walk and they know where I'm off to. I'll go look at those little bits of tree, that little edgeland, depending on the trees. And sure enough, you know, well, at least, you know, 3 times out of 4, I'll probably find some kind of fungus. And that suddenly proved that football game. Don't matter if he wins or not. Dan's had a great time. There you go. Okay, over to you.
No,
The fun guy.
that is so true. I think when I've been, people probably relate to that as well. Like from when you first begin to start to learn a new thing, whether that's fungi or ferns or flowers or anything, and then whenever you go, you are right. You're just looking and being like, oh, I don't know that one. So yeah, definitely relate to that one. We'll come on to you next, Nick.
I'm just wondering if it ties in a lot to my few slides that I did. I just wondered if I'd be repeating myself otherwise. So
Yeah, we
should
can
I
wait until
should
the next bit if you want, or do you want to talk about it now?
what do you reckon? I'll briefly say what it is now.
Yeah.
Basically, my favorite place to find fungi is in the grasslands. So meadows, grasslands. Um, I won't say too much because I give away what's on the slides, but essentially, um, obviously, kind of on a similar level to what Ali said. You know, people think of the woods, people think of fungi, that sort of fairy tale classic image of toadstools in the woodlands. But actually, grasslands have, you know, just as much fungi and are just as incredible fungi, particularly in terms of appearance. Um, but for me, what does it is it's the habitat. I'm just obsessed with habitat. I could go out for a walk in habitat itself and not see much wildlife in general and just enjoy different habitats. But grasslands are one of my passions, and grassland fungi is absolutely insane. And hopefully, I can show you that on the slides. You'll see if you don't know much about grassland fungi, in particular, certain particular family of grassland fungi, you'll find it as bonkers as I do. But yeah, grasslands, amazing place for fungi, especially because from a distance you might look at it and just think it's just a field, and then you get into it and it's just like, whoa, there's loads in here. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I'll pass on next to Rema.
Yeah, so mine actually connects with both of what you've said, actually. So my example isn't woodlands. Actually, my favorite place is a place called Sandscale Hawes, and it's nicknamed locally as Ron Head. And it's interesting because it kind of is like an edgelands place in a way. It's a dunescape, but the reason I say edgelands is I'm like on the fringe of the Lake District. It's just above where I live, which is Ulverston. And a lot of people don't travel much further to go and see like the coast and particularly Barrow and Furness because it's popular as a deprived area, but it's very rich in arts organisations and very interesting in that sense. But also, it's got an amazing coastal environment and Sandscale Hawes. It could take you quite, at least over an hour to cross it. And it has a mixture because it has grasslands. Just back from the coast, it's grasslands, lots of wax caps and fascinating species there. But up at the front, you like climb up the dunes a little bit and you'll open to this vista of the coast with the Lake District Fells in the distance. And at the right time of year, you'll have huge parasol mushrooms, and it's just an absolute capital for them. And I've got a picture of them on the screen I'm going to share. But literally hundreds if you come at the right time of the year. And it's fascinating because it's a place that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily travel out the way to go to, Barrow, but it's amazing coastal environments. And they've got rare natterjack toads as well, so yeah, I'm back on the toads again, of course. So yeah, other environments than woodlands, I agree. Yeah.
Oh, well, I live quite nearby, so I'm definitely gonna have to add that to my list of places to go. And it's always nice as well to hear about, a specific place, because we didn't specify it had to be a place or just a habitat. So it's always nice to hear a range of answers. Next, we're gonna go into a slightly different panel situation where each of our panelists are going to have 5 minutes around each to just talk about their passions, so talk about what they're passionate about. So these are going to be different things shown on screen, or we've got quite an exciting show coming from Ali. And yeah, hopefully it's something a little bit different to split up in the middle before we go into a few more questions to finish us off. So yeah, if you'd like to get started, Ali, you're up first.
Yeah. I'm just going to do a disclaimer. It might not be exciting to everyone, but I thought there's so many avenues, like I said, that you could share here. And so I thought I'd show something that's got what's it got then? If it's not a slideshow, what is it? It's got that potential for all going wrong because I'm going to do a live puppet show thing, and I hope that isn't patronising. But I made this as an educational tool. It's this black box behind me. And it turns out when I did it, because I work in a primary school, that's part of what I do. I work in a primary school. This is all just a hobby stuff. I'm a pastoral mentor, behaviour mentor for children who have, social emotional needs. And I did it as a kids thing to kind of, and I know that I'd enjoy watching it, but I get better feedback from the adults in general because they really like this. So I'm going to show you something, an interaction, a fungal thing that's quite, there's no such thing as quite unique. It's just unique. It's unique. And it's pretty cool. And if you find one, and some people can spend years looking and never come across it, I'm quite fortunate because, again, habitat, which I love that Nick's all over that. Habitat is so important that within reason you should hit upon it. So quite reliable. I'll find it every year. I'm going to tell you what it is. If anyone's never heard of it, no, in fact, you know what? I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it like a cliffhanger. I'm going to start to do the show and then see if you know what's coming. Right, I might have to adjust my camera. Sorry. I was going to make some kind of apology for the state because I'm in my kid's box room. It's the only spare room in the house. And so kind of, yeah. Okay. If I do that, I think the screen shines out. There we go. All right. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a fungus called Cordyceps militaris. Immediately, the Latin can be a bit, whatever. Okay. So it's the scarlet caterpillar club. And here's the thing. This is what it does. So all fungi, a little bit like humans, want to feed and they want to reproduce. And so they have different substrates, which is why we talk about habitat. Is it a particular type of tree it's feeding from? Is it from something in the earth? Is it connecting to a tree? What's the job? Most fungi do one of three things in the world. If you go out and find a mushroom or a fungus, it's either being a friend, which is where it's connected in symbiosis, a symbiotic relationship with trees, a friend, and then they help each other grow. They couldn't exist without each other almost, especially the fungus that couldn't be there. Friend, recycler, which we have more of than anything else. They're the ones, these decomposers, these soil magicians, making and turning all organic dead matter back into beautiful, healthy soil. Friend, recycler, and the killer. And the last one's the one I'm going to concentrate on, the parasites. So this is an interesting parasite because you might not think it's a fungus the first time you meet it. But if even one person here to this evening spots this as a result, it'd be like, yay, you found it. So here's the thing. Guess what? Guess what the host is, the substrate for this parasite? It's a caterpillar. So you've got this little caterpillar here. And when I was looking into cordyceps, this caterpillar club, I was trying to find out what the host is, and it can be other invertebrates, but largely it's caterpillar pupa. So basically, you've got a living caterpillar making its own way around the grass, and it has a little nibble, and one way or the other, it gets infected by the spores, the seeds of this fungus. Okay, and it's not looks like a mushroom. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. Um, and the spores, these seeds, are either in the grass. We're not quite sure. I've certainly not found out yet, and I did a bit of research. If it's in the grass, it's myceliated, and it ingests this mycelium, these spores, or if it actually lands physically on the caterpillar. Nevertheless, it's going along. It eats it, and then it becomes infected. Now, some of you may have seen one of David Attenborough's wildlife programs where he talks about there are many variants of cordyceps, the worldwide, very famous actually, and one in particular takes over the body of an ant as opposed to a caterpillar, and it takes over its brain. It actually physically forces that ant to go to a high place, which it would never do traditionally in the rainforest, to the very uppermost part of the canopy, to clamp onto a leaf. It takes over its jaw, clamps on, eats its body from the inside, and then the fungus fruit body, which is what all fungi and mushrooms are, they're the fruiting body, a bit like an apple on a tree. And then the spores, it's the best place. Why has he done it? It's the best place for spores to kind of be dispersed, land, and then start the process again. So we've got our own version in England. So here's the artistic license. Does it take over its body and force it underground, or would it have gone underground anyway and pupated? If you guys, I'm sure there's some lepidopterists, is that the word? I've never remember that. The people who know about caterpillars and butterflies. Basically, this caterpillar buries itself, and it is myceliated. It is already infected by the actual fungus. Thereupon, this is now its food substrate. It will live and eat off this, and it will completely consume it from the inside out. Apparently, maybe again artistic license, saving its brain for last. At this point, it will eat it through, and then it's ready to make its actual fruiting body. Whereupon it will kind of burst out, off and out of its head, but sometimes there can be multiple fruit bodies, and it will push up through the soil, out and up and out of the grass until you've got this incredible orange fruiting fung body, a little bit like a little matchstick. It's only very small. It's about 4 or 5 centimeters high at max. And there, its spores come out because this is the fruiting body, the seeds, they blow in the wind, down we go, and myceliate the grass, and it all starts again. So that's Cordyceps militaris, the scarlet caterpillar club. And it's a phenomenal fungus in so many ways. That alone, if you find one of those when lead guided walks, if I'm in a particular space, which is grasslands, that's one of the key spaces I often find it in. So already, this is what's beautiful about nature, right? You're making connections, joining the dots. Why keep finding cordyceps? I know one mycologist friend of mine, 10 years before she found her first one. Yet I find it regularly every year, often in the same space, and it's waxcap space. These open, nutrient-poor grassland spaces that are sheep grazed often. So that must be the right habitat for a particular caterpillar that gets, infected. So there's loads of little dots. I could speak a little bit more. The last thing, we're not really going down an edibility route, and I'm not particularly prone to doing so, and I'm not really interested in. But it'd be hard not to mention just how incredible this is, because it also has incredible medicinal properties, where aerobic properties. You can increase your lung capacity, and it was very famous happening in the Olympics in the 1980s that some Chinese athletes, female athletes who are traditionally not very good at doing long distance running, were smashing world records. And so they were being doped like crazy, like what is going on? Tested and tested, nothing came up. And it turns out they've been eating cordyceps for months in advance through their trainer. It has this incredible capacity to do that, full of virility, and just what a thing. What a thing that's a part of our lives, or could be if we choose to invite it in. There you go, Cordyceps militaris, the Scarlet Caterpillar Club.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Ali. We're going to move on next to Nick.
Cool. I'm going to share my slides if that's all right. Hopefully this will be of interest. Maybe not as interesting as Ali's, but this is certainly what gets me passionate with fungi. So can we see that?
Yeah, all on the screen.
Cool. So it says if you go down to the woods, crossed out grasslands today because actually, for me, grasslands, as I said, is the place to see fungi and see amazing fungi. Um, and a couple there just at the sides, just to give you an insight into as to why. So, as I said before, woodlands and toadstools, that's what people think of. Well, general Joe Public, they think of when you say fungi, or certainly use that term toadstools, people think of woodlands, they think of the fly agarics, they think of um, some of those woodland mushrooms and things like that, um, which is fair enough because there are some amazing fungi in woodlands, but it doesn't quite excite me as much as grasslands. Maybe that's just because I live around some incredible grasslands, but I do love grasslands in general, particularly healthy ones. Now, grasslands. So this is a picture. It looks really boring, but actually, this is a picture of one of the best fields close to me for fungi. It looks pretty boring because it's the time of year, it's sort of end of autumn. This is what you'd call a nutrient poor meadow, which sounds really, for anyone who doesn't understand that term, it sounds really counterintuitive. But actually, nutrient poor means it's not fertile, it hasn't had loads of chemicals put into it, and it's really, really good for wildflowers. Wildflowers hate grasses. Grasses take over meadows. And if it's nutrient poor, there's not many grasses, there's a lot of wildflowers, they can thrive. And people think of nutrient poor meadows in terms of wildflowers, but actually, and which is the case for this field, but actually, it also most of the time means for fungi as well, in particular, some very colourful fungi. Um, and it's quite nice because as soon as the flowers finish, you've got a month or two of some very colourful fungi. And in this field here, it's amazing because if you go on the right sort of day or week or in the year, it's dotted around with so many different coloured fungi, which I'll come on to, that it looks like a wildflower meadow again. And I think that's absolutely beautiful, especially for people who, don't like to see the end of summer and obviously coming up to a less colourful time of year. Um, so yeah, there's hidden color. This isn't one of the wax caps I'm going to come into. This is a different one. This is called Blue Roundhead. But just to point out, I mean, look at that. It's absolutely insane. It's like a Smurf. It's just amazing color. And this is just an example of some of the things that can be hidden around the meadows. So I've put healthy meadows equals healthy fungi system equals healthy meadows. Basically, they all work in symbiosis, which means they're all helping each other. So as Ali said, there's the different factors of how fungi can, you know, sort of react with plants and other things. In a meadow like this, most of the fungi is beneficial and they're working together. So the roots of the plants, they send down carbon. Once they're photosynthesized, they send down carbon, and that goes into sort of sugars and things and goes into the fungal mycorrhizal roots. And so the fungi gets that off the plants, and then the fungi sends up nutrients to the plants. So if you see a meadow that's as good as this or even better, come back in autumn because it's going to have amazing fungi because they're helping each other. And those flowers wouldn't be there without the fungi as well. They have to be there to help each other. And certain plants need certain fungi. So orchids, for example, really, really thrive on healthy fungal root systems underground. So if you see there's a lot of orchids, come back in autumn, there's probably going to be some pretty decent fungi there as well. Wax caps. So, I mean, wax caps is what it's all about. I mean, there's no dodging it. This is why I love grassland so much. Yes, I know it isn't great to always love the beautiful and colourful amongst nature, but you can't get around wax caps. They're just stunning. And there's so many different varieties and colours. So what are wax caps? Wax caps are part of the Hydrocybes, which are a family of wax caps mostly, and they love nutrient poor soil, as I've said, with a lot of these grassland fungi. That's a scarlet wax cap there. And they have these incredible gills underneath, but the colours for me is what's amazing. And they all seem to like different parts of the nutrient poor meadows and different habitats in different parts of the country. There's some more common ones and there's less common ones. These are just an example of some of the amazing wax caps we have. I have taken all these pictures in the two fields behind our house. So we've got everything from golden to blackening wax caps to parrot wax caps to scarlet wax caps to meadow wax caps. Whatever your favorite color is, I guarantee it comes under the wax caps and grassland fungi. It's just like a rainbow of color, which I know isn't something just to love fungi in itself, but I mean, if you can't look at that and not be cheered up, it's just beautiful, and it does become this colourful version of a wildflower meadow after those wildflowers have sort of gone over. So really beautiful. The parrot wax cap, which is the green one, and the scarlet wax cap, which is the red one, really classic wax caps that people love, and they're two of my favourites. And there are other amazing grass and fungi amongst the wax caps, similar sort of families. Here's a little spindle. And here are just a few of those. We've got so there's the we've got at the bottom left, as was mentioned before, we've got the parasols, we've got golden spindles in the middle, we've got white spindle, and we've got things like on the right, top right there's orange peel fungus. That's absolutely insane. It's a beautiful little fungi which looks like orange peel. And then we've got earth tongue, the black ones at the top left there. But the bottom right is quite interesting. This wasn't done on purpose, but actually, this is one of the caterpillar club fungi that Ali was referring to. Again, this was taken in one of the fields behind. So you can see this orange club fungi coming out of the ground there, and underneath there will be a caterpillar under there. So I mean, this is very quickly, very vaguely gone into it, but hopefully just an idea of some of these colours of things. It's amazing because you wouldn't think that field there at that time of year would have anything in it, but actually that time of year in there has all these incredible coloured fungi. So that's it.
Oh, brilliant. That was great. Thank you. And yeah, such a good reminder that, even in spaces that kind of look great at this time of year, I find it quite hard to stay optimistic. And I always think the same, that I miss the flowers and this and summer and green. But there is, if you just look for it, there is so much life still there and so many colours as well, like we've just seen. Brilliant. Thanks. Next, we're going to move on to Rema.
Hi. I'm going to try and share my screen. Please work first time this time. Is it working?
Yeah, that's up. Thank you.
Oh, good. That's a relief. So I've been working on this little page and it's on the Mycelium thinking site. I'll read the little intro and then I'll just quickly skim through the rest and show you some of the pictures of what we do in this little corner of the world all of a sudden that you've probably never heard of. And maybe that gives you like hope that sometimes there's amazing, like new emergent things happening in all these strange corners of the world that can give us all hope, I guess. So I'll just, I've went off my own screen 1 minute. So Mycelium Thinking CIC is a network of artists, dreamers and change makers. We believe that deeper connectedness within both our inner and outer landscapes can co-create the healthier networks needed to support a more just and flourishing future. We know the transformative power of art, imagination and community-powered action can be a remedy to the most troubling crisis of our times. Our creative adventures work with the rich metaphors of fungi, incorporating community arts, cross-disciplinary entanglements and land-based artivism, which is art as activism. Our adventures are inspired by underground mycorrhizal networks, a vast worldwide fungal architecture supporting the existence of everything we know. Our ethos is rooted in fostering a profound sense of connection with our inner worlds, outer landscapes, and each other. We draw inspiration from the entangled wisdom of the non-human world, particularly the regenerative nature of fungal mycelium networks. Just as mycelial threads support diverse ecosystems, we aim to bridge gaps between different groups and species, fostering collaborative and hopeful actions to face our biggest challenges together. We consider nurturing well-being and collective imagination as essential for co-creating a future where both people and planet can flourish. Through fungi-inspired artistic creation, multi-arts activities and community-powered play, we create fertile ground for vibrant creative expression to mushroom into new mycelial ways of thinking. So I'll show what that looks like. This bizarre little 1 minute clip, I'm not going to play the whole clip because I don't think sound will come through screen share, but it was a scrap community parade. So it was all made of scrap materials. It worked with, I think it was over 10 local artists. I think the parade in the end had over 100 community members and artists. We worked with local environmental organisations to promote what they do. We also worked with my members, so they had a part of the cabaret. They didn't want to be on the stage, but I found a way around that so they could share their poetry as part of the final piece. And it was all about promoting all these ideas, you know, on a very practical arts-led level. I'll just quickly play a little bit of a snippet. Ooh. From so you can see a little bit of what the parade looks like. You can see a bit there. It might not play because I'm screen sharing. Oh, it is a bit. So yeah, drum bands, scrap wolf, made out of bits of carpet and you know, t-shirts and all sorts. A song about Ulverston and how small towns can have impacts. And we made all these placards out of surplus materials, and the community members suggested the free word slogans because there's horrendous free, you know, stop the boats and stuff, like horrendous free word slogans these days. So we kind of played with that. My partner came up with the idea of like what hopeful slogans can community members come up with. So the Mind members came up with beautiful things like hug your mates, you know, and hope in the dark was our one. And it was like a moment of bringing people together, which is what we're all about. Moving to more specifically to fungi. So some of the stuff we do is arts led, like the parade, and some of the stuff we do is fungi led, or you know, on a more practical level, environmental level, increasing biodiversity. But then I bring in the art side through more in entertainment or like appealing to different audiences or young people. So plugging into fungi and doing music tends to like really attract younger people. And you can see here we made like an edible fungi bed using local surplus materials. That's the parasol here. It looks like a big alien. That's my part of the day with that. Festival arts, growing mushroom blogs. I'm not going to go too much more in the rest. That's us two performing with a mushroom book. We grew mushrooms out of a book, and then I performed poetry along with it. But yeah, I'll finish with these last pictures, which it's very rainbow, isn't it? It's very like bright and cheerful, and we use a lot of that. But one of the big messages that I use, and it's on the placard, it's a bit cut off, but hope int the dark. And it's important to say that that isn't finding light in the darkness, because part of that is like, oh, we don't want the dark. We just got to focus on, you know, this perfect, pure, healed space, and that's not accessible to everyone. Sometimes it's okay to be whole, more whole. I would say that I'm not always well, but I love myself when I'm not well. And that's all about understanding the shadows of ourselves and our culture and appreciating the underground without having to say, oh, but let's focus on the light. It's like the underground and the darkness and suffering and the pain we're feeling in culture right now is really teaching us and trying to tell us to learn these messages, and not ignore the shadows and, you know, make friends with our inner demons and all that kind of stuff. Appreciating the underground for how rich a space it is. And the worms, appreciate the worms and the fungi and all those things you might overlook and disregard. I think that's really important in our culture right now, to move beyond division and accept things that are very different to ourselves. So yeah, hope in the dark. I've blabbered on a lot, so.
No, I loved that. And it's always lovely to, you know, hear about how people can use things in culture to really help, especially when we're going through hard times. And like you say, it doesn't have to be just ignoring those hard times or thinking that we've always got to be happy. You know, nature and fungi can help you get through those hard times whilst also acknowledging it. Thank you. That was really lovely. Cool. So I think we've just sort of coming up towards the end of the webinar. We started a little bit later, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on asking the questions from the chat. And if you would like to drop off, if you're busy and you've got something else on tonight, don't worry, drop off, and this will be going on YouTube at another time, so you can always come back and see your question being answered then. So if everyone's all right with it, we'll just move on to the speakers' questions now, and talk through whatever people have offered up. Just a disclaimer quickly before we go into the questions, that nobody who is speaking today is speaking on foraging as like an expert, and it's not the focus that we've got, so we can't advise on particular foraging. Yeah, but we can sort of discuss it as, as what happens. We all know fungi foraging happens, so it's just that nobody here is an expert. No one's advising you to go and pick fungi and eat it today. So yeah, um, I think the first question that we've got, I'm happy for just anybody to jump in from the speakers. So speakers, just feel free to unmute yourself. What are some surprising ways that fungi interact with other species that a lot of people might not know? That question's from Emily.
Hmm. Has anyone else got an answer? I don't know if I have. I mean, I've just given that like what a big example there of a particular interaction, just supporting over 90% of everything that's green. I might not have my numbers exactly right, but that's roughly what I hear these days. So everything, when you look out of your window, couldn't exist, including the grass roots, plant roots, just those interactions. I'm surprised after years of understanding some symbiosis. I used to say there's mycorrhizal trees, and I'll mention maybe those in a moment, the ones that help sustain certain fungi that wouldn't be there without them. For instance, the orange birch bolete. If you find that, there has to be a birch tree nearby. It couldn't exist without it. They only grow in symbiosis. But I've since found out through, there's always learning that any tree that's not mycorrhizal is a dead tree. So we might not have a fruiting body that we can see, but all trees are connected in some way or other. And that for me is quite a remarkable relationship that comes as a surprise because I didn't even know that till a few years ago.
Can I just add on to that? Don't know how accurate this is, but this is something that I learned a while ago. Apparently, 70% of global biomass of plants is made up by mycorrhizal fungi in the roots, which, if that is correct, is bonkers. But yeah, just the fact that that is existing underground and we can't even see it. So if that is true, then it's just amazing what is down there, and I think that's a surprise in itself.
If you were to put that as an image, I love that, Nick. In a square inch, so essentially an oxal cube sized. I don't know why I'm using that as a thing for a UK youth. You might not know what oxal cube is. A small square inch of soil. There's 4 kilometers of mycelium, apparently. 4 kilometers in a square inch. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how dense it is with life, with fungal activity. Yeah, good one.
Great answers. Yeah, thank you. Our next question comes from Colin. What do you think is the best way we can contribute to the conservation of fungi and protection of their habitats as individual people?
Can I just briefly say on that one, just because I forgot to say in my little slide thing, obviously with the grasslands and the fungi, there are some pretty rare fungi out there, and hopefully soon in the future there'll be more protected status with fungi. But there are just as rare fungi as there are rare plants, etc., in those grasslands. Um, and for taking those as an example, some of those nutrient poor meadows, those meadows can be lost so easily, either through neglect, changes in farming practice, going into the wrong hands. And not only do we lose the wildflowers, etc., but also the fungi will disappear very quickly if it's not managed or looked after correctly. So, a big part of the conservation of these sort of habitats for the fungi is managing it correctly and keeping it nutrient poor or just keeping the habitat right, whether that's correct farming practices or being under conservation measures from a nature reserve charity. Yeah. So, for example, if it was the farmers who do look after these meadows behind me, they would need to not put any chemicals and not add any sort of fertilization to those fields. They'd have to graze it very selectively and just look after it, which isn't hard. And that's the main thing in terms of conservation of these sort of meadows is just we have to be just a little bit more careful.
I think to add to that, it's a good one, Nick. I don't, because just to try and think about what Colin said there as an individual, it's really difficult. I spoke to a specialist in this, and hi Colin, because I know who that is. That's Colin Dool, who knows a lot about fungi. So it's a great question. I think as an individual, it's going to be come down to recording, and so knowing what you're finding. Because I spoke to a specialist, David Satori, who really knows this stuff in terms of conservation. Because I want to do my bit, and I don't do necessarily enough. I'll be really honest about that. It's like the final frontier. What comes next for me and my outreach? I need to know more. And he's saying it's knowing what to protect and how to protect it. It's knowledge, and knowledge is power. So the best thing we can do as an individual, I think, is record. And iNaturalist is a great space for that. And there'll be many people who can support you if you're not sure of an idea on that. Lots of pictures. We can come to that about what that looks like, which is all the different angles. Fungi are a little different in terms of being able to identify exactly what something is. But I think recording is a big part in terms of citizen science, because the bigger the database, the more knowledge we have, and the more knowledge we have, the more chance we have of working, understanding the pictures, the patterns, and actually what we can do with that environment. So that would be a very simplistic answer.
No, that's lovely.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to add something we've only just been doing more in the last year is actively growing fungi, but particularly paying attention to grow native UK species, so not aggressive species like the kind of commercial strains of oysters you might get online. So we've made connection with a place, I think it's called Gourmet Woodland Mushrooms, based in Yorkshire. So they have some Yorkshire strains of oysters, and also they had morels this year. So we've been trying to learn how to grow them in outdoor environments, of not in nature reserves necessarily, but just bringing fungi that aren't already in Ulverston to a new little home. And some of that hopefully will work, because we haven't seen the outcome yet. Morels are a funny one because they're quite a challenging species and they're quite picky about their environment. It took a lot to learn about what they might like. And you might not see the actual fruity mushrooms for many, many years, because people are like, oh, I'm excited to come back next year and see it. I was like, I might want to manage your expectations on that. Because it could be up to 8 years, or it could be, something happens and it makes the mushrooms actually surface. So part of the conversation was about, well, I've actually checked the mycelium, and the mycelium's actually really healthy, and it's an orange coloured mycelium for this particular strain, and it's doing well, and it's supporting the orchard around it. So it's kind of conversation with people about fungi are worth more than the edible mushrooms. And that's part of what I also do as well, which is promote how they're an important part of biodiversity. And it's great if you get the edible mushrooms along it, because we tend to plant the edible mushrooms. We tend to No, we tend to grow the edible mushrooms in public, community, and charitable spaces. So when they do grow, people can also enjoy them as free food. But it's kind of saying that their benefits are more than that, and they're worth it even if the mushrooms don't fruit. So I think that's another direction people could go in, is growing mushrooms in a conscious and sustainable way, which does take quite a bit of learning. And I guess another thing I'd like to do in future, which takes a lot more learning, is if I find edible mushrooms just a way out of Ulverston or in the north, cloning them and bringing them to Ulverston and creating a new home for them. I think that'd be really cool. But I think that's quite a bit more learning and expertise before I get to that level of mushroom growing.
No, that was a lovely answer. Thank you. I'm going to move on to this next one as the last one, sadly, just because we're running over a little bit. So, the next one, as a sustainable forager, to what extent would you say over foraging is an issue for fungal biodiversity? And that one's from Lily.
Okay, well, I could start. I think the clue for me, it's a great question. The clue is in the fact it says over foraging. So I don't think any of us here are foragers. Edibility isn't a big part of my agenda at all. I'm just about finding fungi, identifying them, helping people learn from them, and making those connections. A bit like, I imagine it's a similar feeling throughout this evening. But the fact that over foraging is the point, isn't it? If you overdo anything, that suggests it's too much. Foraging sustainably, I think there's probably room for that, but it's not something I talk about often because I personally prefer to tread lightly. That would be my take. But I think there's a place personally. I mean, I don't often speak of this publicly, but on a sustainable level, I think there's room for it. But it's a really big, really deep leveled element. People are very caring about nature, and quite rightly. But if you thought about just as one thing that could come to mind, and I don't do this, but if you think about the mileage, if you pick something just from the park over the road, that's something that's come with no mileage at all, yet you might have a meal that evening that's come from hundreds, potentially thousands of miles on your plate. So like, oh, immediately you've removed that all that carbon emissions and everything that came with the meal that you ate that evening. But I'm not a forager. I hardly ever eat any fungi. But the over part is the point. I think there's a place for sustainable. But again, I'm not the right person. There'd be far better people, and many of my peers who lead foraging walks who talk about that. But I lead fungi ID walks. So that's my little take on it, I suppose. Yeah, that would be mine.
Can I just mention a couple tiny little bits on that? I'm not a forager myself. I mean, so firstly, whenever I do my tours, I always explicitly say if it's a fungi tour, I don't know. I don't know if it's edible or not. The main thing, especially in terms of edibleness, is they're similar to some of the umbellifer family and plants and things. Some of them look identical, and some of them are edible, and some are not. Some of them will certainly do some damage. But I think in terms of sustainability, I've heard that if people do forage, in particular, um, some of the ones that I've seen around here in grasslands, it's important to have baskets and things with holes in, so spores can be dropped as you're carrying around fungi, things like that, so it can spread spores. But also, in terms of some of the fungi that I mentioned before, so some of the wax caps, for example, some of them are incredibly rare and similar to picking a flower or something. Um, Obviously, the fruiting body on the top is only a tiny part of that fungi's life and only a tiny part of its whole system. But you've a good chance of diminishing that species, particularly if it's not up to the ripest stage of its fruiting body. If there's only one or two in the area, it's certainly going to have a bit of an effect. So certainly heading more towards common common fungus types for foraging certainly is definitely much more appropriate, I think. And also, what's interesting is round here, um, there is quite a lot of lead mining, and I've been told on quite good authority that a lot of the places that people try to forage um, actually have very toxic soils from the lead mining, and there's potential for like all sorts of carcinogenics and things to come into those sort of mushrooms and things. So it's always worth checking where you're getting them from and you know how healthy they are long term. But anyway, that's irrelevant. But yeah,
Yeah, I quickly want to jump in as well to say I'd recommend reading Honourable Harvest by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I think it's a chapter in a book, but there's a really, really good quote about foraging and how you relate to taking from the environment and how you might do that in a more respectful way and it's really good to have that philosophy in mind. But there's loads of different things like not to pick the youngest, and you might leave the ones with the caps open so they're dropping their spores, and not to pick everything that you come across, like every single one. And I see a lot of like discussions, oh, it's fine, it's just the mushrooms, it's just the fruiting bodies. And it's kind of like that's disrespectful to the fact that other things eat them and bugs matter. Insects really matter, like they're dying off in droves. So it's like it's true, it's different to like uprooting a plant, but it's still like it has an impact. Foraging always has an impact. You're not necessarily doing a benefit to the world by going out and picking stuff. But that being said, Mycelium Thinking started before I registered it as a company, and it was more focused on arts. We were going out and we were foraging a lot. And sometimes it's easier when you first have a relationship to not have a reciprocal relationship as much as you could. But that connection has led to where I am now, where I do return that. So I think I'm quite supportive of people doing that in a conscious way because I know you learn from mistakes and you learn from then talking to people like me who are a bit further along with their relationship. So I'm not anti-foraging by any means, but I do think there's harmful ways of approaching it at the moment of, oh, it doesn't matter because, you know, it's just the fruiting body, but it's not. It feeds other things and species. So
Yeah, it's definitely conscientious argument at the moment, isn't it, and debate of what to do. And you have reminded me there actually of when Ali did a guided walk where I live, and we saw a death cap, and it was half eaten by the time I visited it again a week ago. So a death cap, if we'd have picked that, then we wouldn't be here for the webinar today. But obviously some kind of slug or other insects or invertebrate has been munching on it, because a week later it was half gone. So yeah, a good reminder that, for some insects and things that are struggling, it can really be a helpful food source. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you to the brilliant speakers for a great session. We're going to send out an email afterwards that will have links to all of the speakers that we've had today, so you can follow them on socials and keep up to date with what they're doing. And for the questions that we haven't answered, if you want to, you can then get in touch with our panelists and ask them those questions if you would like some more answers. So yeah, thank you again for everyone who's come.
Katie, can I hijack just the last thing? I'm sorry, Katie, can I hijack one last thing?
Yeah, last minute, go.
I felt like I just feel like I know, maybe no one cares about trying to find fungi or what they are, but the number one question is usually, what is it? And I said I might give you a hack. I've got to show you this thing. So there's two things. One is what on the back of what Nick said about these grasslands, and some people might feel they can't access them. He's absolutely right, and I've spent a lot of time in them. But we have an alternative, an urban alternative, which is cemeteries and graveyards. They replicate in many ways the same habitat, nutrient poor, well-established mossy lawns, short mown instead of sheep grazed. So get to your local graveyards, or in the November time, October, and you can see tons of wax caps. I did whole tours with friends this year, going around all the graveyards, finding the very similar species. So they are accessible if you can't get to an upland. And last of all, 4 big trees. I talked about this radar and understanding habitat, and there's so many elements you could look at. But if I just gave you 4 trees to keep on mind, these are our 4 big trees that are mycorrhizal symbiotic. Birch, beech, pine and oak. Birch, beech, pine and oak. Remember that? Birch, beech, pine and oak. Birch, beech, pine and oak. And if you have that, that's why I find them at garden centres or B&Qs or at the sides of football pitches. You spot that, people's gardens, have a look, and there might be amazing fungi growing with them. If you get those on radar, it's a quick shortcut to starting spotting fungi. Sorry, had to do that.
Oh, that's perfect ending. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you again, everyone. Thanks for all the brilliant speakers. Thanks to the lovely UKY4N team for helping with the questions and sorting out all the moderating. And yeah, thank you to our great attendees. So yeah, like I said, we'll send out an email with everyone so that you can get in touch with any of the speakers or follow them on social media and get involved with anything they do. And hopefully we should have another webinar coming in February time. So if you keep your eyes on UK Youth for Nature, then we're going to take a little break over the Christmas period and see you again in February. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.